Hello boys and girls, welcome to Science in Daily Life. I am Sir Zamin.
And I am Miss Freeman.
I do trust that you guys are doing well, and boys and girls, I hope you have been studying, because for today we will be wrapping up our whole chapter on respiration. In our previous lesson, we would have explained how breathing occurs in mammals. We would have identified parts of the respiratory tract. And lastly, we discussed how respiration occurs.
So boys and girls, today we'll be looking at respiratory surfaces. Our objectives for today is to identify features of the respiratory surface. We'll also state the benefits of the characteristics of respiratory surfaces. We'll discuss surface area volume ratio. And finally, we'll describe tissue respiration. Let us talk a little bit about respiratory surfaces. Respiratory surfaces are needed for the exchange of gases in an organism. Breathing describes the ways in which air is brought close to the respiratory surface. In fishes, water with air dissolved in it streams over the gills. In mammals, however, air flows in and out of the lungs. In this section, we will talk a little bit about how oxygen from air reaches cells for internal respiration.
Okay, boys and girls, let's go straight into features of respiratory surfaces. And we will look at the features by comparing the respiratory surface in a fish to that of mammals. If you could have recalled in 2 or 3 lessons back, we looked at breathing in a fish, where we spoke about the fish's gill. Now, the fish's gill is the respiratory surface of a fish, whereby for mammals, we have our lungs. So, the fish's gill. Firstly, the gill lamella are delicate structures, whereby on the other hand, the mammals, the walls of the hollow alveoli are thin, which are just 1 cell thick. Comparing those two, we can see that there's a common feature between them. That feature is being thin. Secondly, in a fish, the gills are continuously bathed with water. They are wet. In mammals, we have certain cells in the alveolar walls which secrete mucus. Boys and girls, what is common between those? Yes, they both are moist.
Now, let us look at a third point, boys and girls. The numerous lamellae greatly increase the surface area of the gills, whereas in mammals, the numerous alveoli greatly increase the surface area of the lungs. It is said that if the lungs of an adult man were to spread out, the tissues would cover the area about 90 meters. For example, and this is talking about basically or comparing, or the common feature from this is that it's extensive. Fourthly, or lastly, we'll talk about how it's vascular. The common feature between the two fish gill and mammal lung is that it's vascular. Let us talk about the fish gill. The gills of a freshly caught fish are bright and red. Each lamella has a network of blood vessels. The redness shows that there's blood is passing through. Whereas in a mammal lungs, there are many capillaries around the alveolus, basically allowing blood flow as well, so it's vascular. Next, we'll talk a little bit about the benefits of characteristics of respiratory surfaces. Why do you think we need it to be thin, moist, extensive, and vascular? Let us now start with thin.
Okay, boys and girls, so the first feature which we'll be looking at will be thin. Let us look at the benefit as to why respiratory surfaces are thin. In this structure, the distance across which gases and other solutes have to diffuse is small. Hence, being thin is very important, so you can easily be diffused in and out. Secondly, the characteristic of being moist. What is the benefit, or why should respiratory surfaces be moist? This is so because gases have to be in solution before they can diffuse through cell walls.
Now, boys and girls, why do you think our respiratory system should have an extensive feature? Now, chemical reactions take place at atomic and molecular levels. If there's a large surface area or a large surface, the reactants could spread thinly. Their particles would then be closer together for chemical combination. Let us talk about a surface area being vascular. Why do you think we need that? Blood is an agent of distribution. Within many capillaries close to the continuous air supply, gases can diffuse into the bloodstream very easily.
Let us now move on to other respiratory surfaces. Small organisms have larger surface area to volume ratio than larger organisms. A single-celled organism, for example the amoeba, has a large surface area to volume ratio. It can therefore absorb substances, for example oxygen, efficiently by diffusion through its entire body surface. On the other hand, a large organism, such as a mammal, with its surface area to volume ratio, it cannot get enough oxygen through its body surface and to all its cells quickly.
Now, boys and girls, such large organisms have special respiratory surfaces. For example, the lungs in mammals and the trachea in insects for absorption of oxygen. Now, boys and girls, let us talk a little bit about surface area and volume ratio. We noted in the preceding section that small organisms tend to have larger surface area volume ratio than larger organisms. Now, what we can basically say is that as an object increases in size, the surface area volume ratio gets smaller. Now, let us take a look at tissue respiration.
Okay, students, so let's go straight into what is tissue respiration. We have discussed how air is brought close to respiratory surfaces. There is usually more oxygen in the air than there is in the cell of respiratory organs. The oxygen in solution diffuses across the cell membranes and into the blood. Blood in man contains a red pigment called hemoglobin, which allows it to carry much oxygen. The hemoglobin combines with the oxygen, forming oxyhemoglobin. Oxyhemoglobin is then carried by the blood to every cell. The concentration of oxygen in the cells is very low. Oxygen passes out of the blood by diffusion into the cells, and hemoglobin is reformed.
So, boys and girls, if you take a look here, you can see oxygen plus hemoglobin will give us oxyhemoglobin. Whereas, when we want our hemoglobin to reform, we have oxyhemoglobin is equal to oxygen plus hemoglobin. Now, let us move on to how each cell uses the oxygen to oxidize. Now, each cell in our body uses the oxygen to oxidize or burn the food in it. This is tissue respiration. It is also called cellular respiration and internal respiration. The energy stored in food is released in a form that can be used for life processes. There are many activities in which we can do to show that, you know what, there is potential energy in our body, where there are actually oxygen being used to burn what we have there.
Now, in addition to that, much carbon dioxide diffuses out of each cell into the blood. The blood returns to the respiratory surface. There, carbon dioxide is in greater concentration in the blood than in the cells of the respiratory surfaces. Carbon dioxide then diffuses out of the respiratory surface into the atmosphere.
Now, boys and girls, in conclusion, we would have looked at the features of the respiratory surfaces. We would have stated the benefits of the characteristics of respiratory surfaces. We discussed a little bit on surface area volume ratio. And finally, we talked about tissue respiration. Until next time, I am Miss Riemann.
And I am Sir Zamin.
Bye-bye.